discuss the topic Marxist literary theories, an introduction. At the beginning, let me tell you about a problem. The topic will have approximately 1 hour. The area is so vast that it's quite difficult to condense everything within 1 hour. However, I will try my level best to focus on some important aspects regarding the different schools of Marxism. I may be excused for skipping some portions, some areas within this vast area, Marxism. Okay. Let me begin with the learning objectives of this topic. Through this topic, I would like to introduce the different streams of Marxist approach. If you look at the title, you can see there are different layers, there are different streams of Marxist literary approach. So we have to be very clear about that. Secondly, I would like to equip you with some reading strategies, how to read cultural texts, to put it in a broad way, cultural texts, by applying Marxist theories. Well, I would like to introduce the structure of my presentation. If you go through the structure of the presentation, you can see there are so many components, starting with the classical Marxism, then Marxist criticism, Lukács and Gramsci, then Frankfurt School, structuralist Marxism, New Left Marxism, Marxist feminism, eco-socialism, post-Marxism, then return of Marx, the recent debate on return of Marx, then reading text, followed by a glossary of Marxism. Right. So let's begin with the first component, that is classical Marxism. Right. So when we talk about classical Marxism or the beginning of Marxism, so we have to think about, or we have to rather go back to 19th century, when we came across what we call industrial revolution. So industrial revolution started flourishing in the West, and as a consequence, we can see one group of people earning so much profit, whereas another category, working class, they started suffering under capitalist class. So we had industrial class or capitalist class, and we had working class. And let me give you one example. Charles Dickens, so many writers depicted this class conflict of industrial age of 19th century. And I am reminded of a very important novel by Charles Dickens, Hard Times, in which we come across a character, Stephen Blackpool. So Stephen Blackpool, a tragic character representing the working class. So many writers they focused on the exploitations, the sufferings of the working class. Right. So interestingly, two Germans, one, Karl Marx, he was born in 1818. So Karl Marx, he happened to come to Britain from Germany, and he was a son of a lawyer. But he had a very difficult life, in the sense that he suffered from poverty in spite of being the son of a lawyer. The second important personality, Engels. So Engels also happened to come to England because he was the son of a factory owner, a textile factory owner. Right. So Marx happened to come across an article by Engels. So later they became friends. They got into close contact with each other. They discussed the class exploitation of workers. So they sympathized with the working. So they had some common ideas. So they put their heads together. They documented their ideas. They propounded an economic philosophy, a political philosophy, and the result was the publication of Communist Manifesto in 1848. Right. We should appreciate Marx and Engels for sympathizing with the suffering class, the workers. Right. So the economic theories of Marx and Engels, they were mainly published through Communist Manifesto. However, we have got some other works such as the German ideology, which came out in 1845, I suppose. Then we have the famous work by Marx, Das Kapital, which was published in 1867. Right. So this Marx and Engels, they came together and they introduced a new approach which revolutionized the entire world, touching on fields such as politics, economics, sociology, history, philosophy, etc., etc. So Marxism had a powerful impact on different fields, including literature. Right. So when we talk about classical Marxism, we have to think about 2 or 3 important concepts. One is class, I have already mentioned. So Marxism focuses on, interestingly, Marx was against using the term Marxism. Right? So class. So Marxism is a class philosophy, class ideology. That's very important because it deals with, essentially deals with the class conflict between the capitalist class as well as the working class, the conflict, the house and the so-called house and the have-nots, or the bourgeois class, or the proletariat, right? And Marxism, we all know that it is a materialist philosophy. So economy is very important. So the capitalist class or the bourgeois class is very powerful because they have the capital. The factory owners, they had capital. So they had power over the ruling class and the ruled class, right? Then, so it is essentially a materialist philosophy. Then economy is a very important component, and the classical Marxism, interestingly, focused so much on the economic aspect. Later on, so many theoreticians they question the over-dependence of classical Marxism on economy. And there is a derogatory term which is called economism. Okay. Later, some of the later theories they attack the economism of classical Marxism. Right? Another important concept of classical Marxism ideology. So ruling class. The people, they try their level best to communicate their ideology through so many representations, including literature and art, right? So ruling class ideology is very, very important. And Marx, according to Marx, the quote Marx, ideology is a set of beliefs. It is nothing but false consciousness. So it's a consciousness, it's a false consciousness, according to Karl Marx. So Marx and Engels, they stood for change in society, revolutionary change in society. And here I am reminded of the famous statement made by Karl Marx. I quote Marx: "The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it." I repeat the word change. So the point is to change the power structure, the class structure in society, right? So coming to this economic dimension of this classical Marxism. So we have the famous architectural metaphor, base and right, and base stands for material means of production. Right? The capitalist class, they possessed the material means of production. So economy is the base, right? And what is the superstructure? Superstructure consists of other realms in society, such as art, law, politics, religion, etc., etc. So superstructure rests on the economic base. So base is the foundation, and the economic base determines human relations, everything in society. So art, in a way, is a product of the economic base, the social condition. So social condition is very, very important. And all the cultural representations in society, they are governed by this social context base. And this base and superstructure, it was later slightly modified by some thinkers, which I am going to tell you shortly. Right. So another important classical Marxism. So throughout Marx and Engels, they said throughout human history there has been a conflict between two groups. In the medieval period, we had feudal landlords, tenants, and later we had factory owners and workers, and now the capitalist class and the working class, the proletariat, right? So throughout history, we can see the conflict between these two groups, and in this class war, ultimately, according to Marx and Engels, who will win this class war? And according to Marx and Engels, it is the working class people who will overthrow the bourgeoisie class and he. Right. So that is the ideal proposed by Marx and Engels in the early phase of classical Marxism. Right. But we can see some modifications, and I would say some revisions taking place in the later period, later decades, right? And when we think about this Marxist literary criticism, there are mainly two broad categories of Marxist criticism, according to George Steiner. And the first category is Leninist Marxist criticism, which became very popular in 1930s to and what are the important aspects of Leninist Marxist criticism? And according to Leninist Marxist criticism, art is explicitly committed to the political cause of the Social Democratic Party. So there is a direct connection between art and this political cause, right? And a literary text, to put it in another way, a literary text should directly reflect the socio-economic forces in that particular period, right? And this Leninist Marxist criticism, that school, they rather imposed what we call socialist realism, right? And they condemned artistic self-expression, especially all sorts of experimentation. They rejected, particularly Lukács. He rejected the avant-garde modernism as decadent, right? And to give you a few ideas about Lukács here, so he was a Hungarian thinker and aesthetician, and he brought a humanist approach to class struggle. Okay, he proposed a humanist approach to to class struggle, especially in his work History and Class Consciousness, which came out in 1923, right? And let's look at each social class has a class consciousness, and he is famous for his study on novels. And according to him, novel is a form, it's a bourgeois form. I quote him, it's a bourgeois form. And I quote him, the novel is the epic of a world that has been abandoned by God, right? And he rejected, as I have just pointed out, rejected modernism just come Beckett Joyce, and for propagating some sort of lies. So realism, or what we call socialist realism, is a very important component in the theoretical framework proposed by Lukács. And in 1934, a Congress of Soviet writers, a Congress was convened, and in that Congress, the direct political commitment of the writer to the party was affirmed, and writer's commitment to class interests was also highlighted in that conference, like Congress. So, when we come to the second category of Marxism, Engels'ian Marxist criticism. In the case of Engels'ian Marxist criticism, which became very prominent approximately during the same period, 30s, 40s period, the freedom of art was highlighted. Freedom of art from direct political determinism. So art is free from direct political determinism, and there was a need for close formal analysis of literature. Language of literature has its own characteristics. So, in a way, we can say they promoted, or what we call, they supported experimentation in the field of art, and they were rather liberal, unlike the Leninist Marxist school, right? So the divisions of the divisions of Marxism into different schools, it's flexible in the sense that after the first period, that is the era of classical Marxism, we can see revisions, and in a way, all these thinkers which commented on classical Marxism, we can call them neo-Marxists or so, right? So another neo-Marxist is and he's a very important thinker, and he was a founder of Italian Communist Party. He was an activist, and we know that he is famous for the work of the prison notebooks, right? And according to Antonio Gramsci, ideology is not essentially false consciousness. So you can see the change happening. Ideology is not dormant, it's not passive. It is somewhat more important, right? Ideology is very important in cultural texts, and you can see the subsequent the thinkers of Marxism, they have in the scope of Marxism, in the sense that not only economic base, there are some other factors which are also very important in analyzing cultural texts. So not only the base, but also some other domains such as ideology. So ideology is very important, and it was he who highlighted the importance of ideology at the first time, followed by Althusser, who was the first one to theorize ideology. So we are going to discuss that. Okay. When we come to Antonio Gramsci, we have to think about two or three very important concepts. The first important concept is hegemony. So the word hegemon, it is a Greek term. Hegemon means leader, and hegemony means leadership, right? So leadership or dominance of one class over the other. Okay. So Gramsci was highlighting the cultural hegemony. That means the moral and intellectual leadership of the capitalist class or the ruling class over the working class, right? So hegemony is emphasized by the ruling class, mainly through intellectuals. That's very important. So intellectuals, according to Gramsci, they are the intermediaries, and I quote him, they are the deputies of the state. They are the agents of the power structure. They are the agents of the ruling structure. So intellectuals, they spread ideas. They spread the values of the ruling class. They spread the norms of the bourgeois class or capitalist class in the civil society. Okay. So civil society, they are blinded. I use the word blinded by these intellectuals who spread ideas. And according to Gramsci, there are two categories of intellectuals. One is traditional intellectuals, and the traditional intellectuals, they are not organized. They are independent, and at the same time they are critical. Sometimes they are critical of the this power apparatus, right? And we have the second category, that is organic intellectuals. They are organized, well organized. For example, trade union leaders. So these both traditional and organic intellectuals, they spread the ideas of the ruling class. And another very important concept introduced by Gramsci is the concept of subaltern. So it was Gramsci who introduced this concept, which was later popularized by none other than Gayatri Chakrabarti Spivak. Right. So subaltern refers to the exploited groups in society. Right. To put it simply, right. So coming back to this intellectuals, there is a chapter in Prison House Notebooks, the formation of intellectuals. That chapter is very, very important for us. So these intellectuals, they construct what we call spontaneous consent. They create spontaneous consent. They work in civil society. So they play a very major role in popularizing, spreading the values of the ruling class. So let's quickly move on to the next group, that is Frankfurt School. So in Frankfurt School, mainly we have two thinkers. One is Adorno, and secondly Walter Benjamin. Adorno is more important. Only a few works about Marxism, few pieces on. Right. So coming to Adorno, so this Institute of Social Research was established in 1923. So this Frankfurt Institute, it was a group of neo-Marxist. That's very important. A group of neo-Marxist theorists and philosophers. They opposed Lukács. So, one thinker is critiqued, and one thinker's ideas are modified by the subsequent thinkers. So these Lukács' ideas were opposed by this Frankfurt School, especially Lukács' focus on realism or over-dependence on realism. Right. So we have, apart from Adorno, we have one more, that is Herbert Marcuse. So Herbert Marcuse, he introduced the notion affirmative culture. So to put it simply, what is affirmative culture? Affirmative culture is a culture which is conformist but not critical. A culture which is conformist but not critical. That is affirmative culture according to Herbert Marx. Right? So Adorno, coming to Adorno. So Adorno and Horkheimer, they collaborated and they wrote the famous work Dialectic of Enlightenment, which came out in 1944 and subsequently got translated and was published in 1995. And Adorno and Horkheimer, they introduced the concept of industry, which is very, very important. And Adorno is very, as far as cultural studies is concerned, just like Raymond Williams and Stuart Hall. This Adorno and Horkheimer's notion of culture industry. So what is culture industry? They propose the notion of culture industry to describe mass cultural forms in the wake of capitalism. So mass culture and mass cultural forms. And these mass cultural forms, they transform the individual from a thinking and discerning subject into an unthinking and passive consumer. So these mass cultural forms, they have an agenda, each and every form has an agenda in the sense that the aim is ultimately to produce consumers who do not think and who do not act. Unthinking and passive consumers. Right? And subsequently, they wrote another work, The Culture Industry, Enlightenment of Mass Deception, in which they continued to discuss on the banalities of manipulative mass culture and the critique of Enlightenment rationalism. So they attacked, they criticized the manipulation of mass culture. Right? Culture industry. And culture is not an abstract thing, but it is rather produced by individual genius, but a product of social. Culture is not produced by individual genius, but a product of social and economic conditions in society. That's very, very important. So, this mass culture manipulates. It standardizes pleasure and fun, catering to market ideology. The aim is to produce maximum profit. So beauty is standardized, and we all know the example Fair and Lovely, right? So branding is very important. So some celebrities are used to brand certain products as if they are standard products. So mass cultural forms standardize as well as stereotype certain things. For example, corruption. When we think about corruption, we are reminded of politicians, right? So this culture industry by Adorno and Horkheimer is very, very important. And another important thinker is Walter Benjamin. So we have to move on very quickly. Walter Benjamin. So Benjamin, he wrote a very important work, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, which came out in 1935. In this work, he proposed a positive side of technology, right? That's very important. And he surveyed the importance of technology in the 19th and 20th century urban and industrialized society and the enormous development of media, right? And in his work, the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction, and he highlighted the world of mass-produced artworks, and he specifically focused on photography and film. And Adorno, I beg your pardon, this Walter Benjamin, he proposed a very important concept, that is aura. And aura is very important. That is, aura is created by mass-produced artworks, but originality, but it creates a new ethos of artistic production and consumption. Right? So, a photograph is not the original thing, or A film is not the original thing, but we cannot claim originality. There is element of realism, but a different kind of realism, a new kind of ethos of artistic production and conception. So that is what Benjamin talked about, and he wrote another work that's an essay. The author as producer, and in this essay, he specifically focuses on the historical and cultural effect of new technologies. So the cultural effect of new technologies on society. So you can see, if we go back to classical Marxism from Marx and Engels, and we come across a thinker who thought about the use of technology, the culture of technology, and its impact, right? And the next school of structuralist school. Here we have two important thinkers, Althusser and Maschery. Maschery is not very important, but the first one is very, very important. Right? So, because it's Althusser is a very important part of the syllabi in many universities. And Louis Althusser, let me sum up the ideas of Althusser quickly. Louis Althusser, he was a structuralist Marxist. He brought structuralism and Marxism together, and his very, very important essay, Ideology and the Ideological State Apparatus. And this essay came out in 1970. And this essay combined Marxism with structuralism, and he analyzed how dominant systems enforce their control by subtly molding their subjects through ideology. A set of social structures, a set of dominant systems, they mold individuals through ideology. It's a subtle way of converting people or blinding people with the use of a particular ideology. And he, as I said earlier, the first one to theorize ideology at the end, Althusser. And according to Althusser, ideology is not merely false consciousness. See how he revises the notion of Karl Marx. Ideology is not merely false consciousness, but a set of beliefs and ideas. It creates our lives. I quote him. It creates our lives. So ideology is very, very important in our lives. Not only the economic base, but ideology is also very, very crucial. So the platform, the foundation of the base is slightly expanded. So according to him, we are trapped in ideology. We are actually trapped in ideology. We have no escape. It creates our self and identity from which we have no escape. So we have no escape from ideology. So here the notion of resistance comes. So he doesn't give the space for resistance in his theory of ideology, right? And according to Althusser, social structure is not monolithic, but it is decentered by social formations or ISAs. So he talks about, apart from this ideology, he talks about the social structures, and he proposes two important notions. One is ISA, and the second one is RSA. SA is the broad category, state apparatus. The state has so many apparatuses, agents, structures, domains, through which the state ideology or dominant ideology is percolated down among civil society, rather unknowingly or knowingly. Right? The first category is ISA, ideological state apparatus. So ideological state apparatus includes education. There is educational ISA, religious ISA. So, and by talking about this religious ISA, we have the famous example, the crucible play, how religion plays a major role. Religious ISA. Law. politics, trade, media, family. Family is also an IS according to Althusser. And here, let's think about that character Nora in a doll's house was actually trapped in the patriarchal society within the family, and she is a victim of what we call family ISA, from which she breaks out towards the end of that play. Okay. School, when we talk about educational ISA, school is a very important educational ISA. I'll just give an example, right? That's a very important biography by Lytton Strachey. That is eminent. So, eminent Victorian is a biography of some 4 or 5 important figures of Victorian era. And Lytton Strachey, he wrote a small section on Dr. Thomas Arnold. So Dr. Thomas Arnold, he was the headmaster of the famous rugby school. So through the character Dr. Thomas Arnold, Lytton Strachey, he analyzes or rather critiques the public school system of Victorian era. Right. I'll give another example. Think about the novel Hard Times by Charles Dickens, in which we come across the schoolmaster, Gradgrind, Thomas Gradgrind. So, Thomas Gradgrind's utilitarian philosophy, it was critiqued by Dickens, right? So, education is one of the important ISAs according to Althusser. The second broad category is RSA. RSA includes police, army, etc. So the main distinction between ISA and RSA is that ISA functions by consent, okay, whereas RSA functions by force. So force is exerted, and when we talk about Althusser, we should also remember one more important concept, that is interpellation. So interpellation means, indoctrination. You are interpellated. So one particular ideology is interpellated among people, right? So the interpellation of ideology, technically it means hailing people. A police officer calls you, right? So interpellation is very, very important as far as ideological indoctrination is concerned, according to Louis Althusser. The second important theory is theory measuring. Measuring is not very important, I repeat. His very important work is a theory of literary production. If you look at the last word in the title, production, that gives us an indication. A theory of literary production came out in 1978, and it is a first extensive discussion of Althusserian Marxism. Maschery was a disciple of Althusser, was a student of Althusser. In this work, he discusses Althusserian Marxism at length, right? And according to Maschery, a literary text explores, rather exposes, a literary text exposes and explores its contradictions that are inherent in that ideology. So a text exposes the contradictions in the ideology. And a writer is a workman. That's very interesting, right? A writer is a workman and a producer. A writer produces, a writer works. But a writer cannot be considered as a creator. So there is no room for genius. There is no room for artistic genius, and according to Maschery. So a writer is simply producing the ideology of the ruling class by writing a text, by painting a picture, by making a film, etc. etc. So artistic genius is played down by Maschery. So this is a highly problematic situation, right? Where do we locate personality of a writer. So, can we confidently say that Shakespeare is absent in Hamlet or some other plays such as Macbeth? Right? So that's a debatable issue, right? Anyway, the next important development in Marxist theory is new left Marxism. So, new left Marxism, we have three important figures: Raymond Williams, Eagleton, and Frederick Jameson. So, among these three, Raymond Williams is very, very important, most important, and he was one of the founders of Birmingham Center for Contemporary Culture Studies, a very important figure in the field of culture studies, and he campaigns Marxism in cultural studies, a very important philosopher. And some of his important works, Marxism and Literature, keywords, very, very important, culture and society. And according to Raymond, culture is a whole way of life. And we all know the famous statement about culture. Culture is because one of the two or three most complicated words in the English language. So the approach of Raymond Williams is broadly known as cultural materialism. So Raymond Williams and cultural materialism. So it's an analytical method. So according to Raymond Williams, the economic base of traditional Marxism is too rigid. The economic base of traditional Marxism is too rigid. So see, all these thinkers, they try to make this philosophy a little flexible. Okay, and therefore this traditional Marxism may be modified by including some other realms, right, and social practices, right. This Raymond Williams, he talks about culture at length, and he divides culture into three categories. That's very important: dominant culture, residual culture, and emergent culture. So dominant culture is the hegemonic culture, culture of the ruling class. If we take the case of film, commercial films, you can say, right? This residual culture, the culture which is slowly disappearing. The continued culture which is slowly disappearing, but its traces can be felt. You know, the continued presence in the present context. And we have, the example Gandhism. So we can see the elements of Gandhism in so many works, even now, right? Including films, etc. So the traces of a past culture, the traces of a past ideology gets repeated in cultural representations. And we have the emergent culture, that is the arrival of new culture, new beliefs, new set of values. So the emergent culture, the best example is perhaps in TikTok, right? So there are so many practices, new practices emerging. So dominant culture, emergent culture, and residual culture. So these three aspects of three categories of classifications of culture are very, very important in analyzing the theorist Raymond Williams. So Terry Eagleton is not very, very important. It's essentially a Marxist writer, though he wrote a few books such as Criticism and Ideology, which came out in 1976, in which he makes a very interesting observation, which is nothing new, right? A literary text is not merely an expression of ideology, but the product of ideology. So it's not only an expression of ideology, but a product of ideology. So therefore, a text is dependent on a particular ideology, the base, right? That's very important. So according to him, ideology includes the political as well as the whole system, right? The whole system and theories of representation that would make up the picture of a person's experience. He broadens the field of ideology, which includes the whole realm of individual experiences, right? And coming to Jameson, Frederick Jameson, American Marxist critic, and Jameson's one concept is important. Let me quickly introduce that concept: the political unconscious. And according to him, in cultural representations, in cultural texts, the contradictions of history are masked, they are hid or silenced. Narratives are therefore political. There is a political unconscious that can be found in cultural texts. So you can see the masking of political unconscious because there's a deliberate silence of contradictions within a text. And this Jameson came under postmodernism, and according to him, postmodernity was a consequence of late capitalism, etc., etc. Okay, so let me quickly move on to the next thing, that is Marxist feminism, right? Marxist feminism opposes the sex-blindedness of mainstream Marxism. So Marxism, the mainstream Marxism, classical Marxism does not address gender. That's very important. The oppression of women through capitalism, it highlights or it focuses on the oppression of women through capitalism and ownership of private property. And we have 2 or 3 important figures: Claudia Jones, Evelyn Reed, Clara Fraser. So this is a developing field, Marxist feminism, right? I'll just give an example quickly. There's a very famous Malayalam novel by Khadija Mumtaz, Bursa. So it's a diasporic novel, Bursa. In Bursa, we come across the main character Sabita Rashid. So Sabita, it's all about the experiences, diasporic experiences faced by Sabita in Saudi Arabia. And she faces a discrimination, exploitation and discrimination in the field of labor, etc., etc. So we can see a Marxist feminist approach. We can make a Marxist feminist reading of Bursa, right? So another important approach is eco-socialism, also called green socialism or socialist ecology. It's a developing area. A vision of a transformed society in harmony with nature. That's very important. Marxists, of late they have started focusing on the importance of being in harmony with nature. Alternative to socially and ecologically destructive systems such as patriarchy, racism, fossil fuel economy, globalization and environmental degradation. So 2 important figures, Caroline Lucas and Alan Roberts. So combining ecology and socialism is a new approach. It's a developing approach in the field of Marxism. The next important development in contemporary development in Marxism is post-Marxism. Post doesn't mean that end of Marxism. Post means other than or more than. It calls for a revision of Marxism in the present context. That's very important, especially in the era of global capital. We need a revision of Marxism in the present context. And there are 2 important figures. You can see the picture of leclerc and Chandel Mouffe. Leclerc passed away recently in 2014. So they proposed a new approach in their work, Hegemony and Socialist Strategy, which came out in 1985. So the notion proposed by Leclerc and Mouffe is antagonisms. To put it simply, antagonism is nothing but in the conventional Marxism focus on class. Okay, in every society, according to Leclerc and Mouffe, in every society we can see so many levels of conflict. Apart from class, there is obviously class conflict in a society. Apart from class, there are conflicts such as gender. Okay, there is gender conflict. conflict in the realm of ethnicity, sexual orientation. Caste is also important, especially in the Indian context. So there are different levels of conflict in society. So what we actually require is, according to them, is to expand the domain of class-centeredness of traditional Marxism by expanding this domain. And in Kerala, we had a discussion of Sottovadam, okay, proposed by 𝐾𝐬𝐿 Muhammad and P.K. Fokker. Okay. So they also proposed a revision of conventional traditional Marxism. You have to take it in a broader sense, according to them. So antagonisms are there in society, and according to Leclerc. So we have to address other antagonisms in society. Okay. Another important contemporary theorist, Marxist theorist is, Jacques Rancière. Rancière is not essentially or not fundamentally a Marxist theory, but he talked about Marxism a lot. So Rancière's work, The Ignorant Schoolmaster. So he proposed in this work. It is a very interesting book, The Ignorant Schoolmaster. It is about the French education system, and in this work he proposes what we call an equality. He's popularly known as the theorist of equality, contemporary thinker and philosopher, Rancière. So you have to break that hierarchy: teachers, teaching class, and the student class. So teachers and the students. So we have to break the hierarchy. What we actually require is equality of intelligence and the absence of hierarchy, right? And what we really require, according to Rancière, is intellectual emancipation. The second part of the title of the work is 5 Lessons in Intellectual Emancipation. He proposes intellectual emancipation for the education system in the French context. And here I am really reminded of that syllabus formation, the politics of syllabus formation. Do student community have a stake in the formation of syllabus? Syllabus is made by a group of the so-called experts within course, but the real stakeholders, the students, they have no role. Okay, so this is a result of this hierarchy, right? Now, coming to the end of that session, return of Marx. So now we talk about this is actually another theory, return of Marx. Crisis of global capitalism. Now we are facing a global crisis. We are facing a pandemic. So crisis of global capitalism and atrocious condition of working class. So working class revolution has not taken place at all. That's clear. But this working class continue to suffer. So what's the way out? Crisis of global capitalism and atrocious condition of working class. So we have to find an alternative approach in the post-COVID era. Okay, so we have, we desperately need a new approach proposed by the recent work by, Slavoj Žižek, pandemic COVID-19 shakes the world. And he proposes what he calls, communism. So from person-centered approach to community-centered approach. So we have to change our strategy. We have to change our worldview. Right? So Thomas Piketty also he commented about the importance of Marxism in the present context. Right. Let me move on to the next slide. See how to read text with the help of Marxist methodology. There are so many examples. Think about 𝐊𝐴 Untouchable. Think of Dickens' Hard Times. Think of Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. So there are so many works. So when you come across a work, we have to think about the social order in a text, the class representation in a text. We have to closely look at the response of character, each and every character. And we have the famous example, Jimmy Potter. Jimmy Potter is very angry towards his wife, Alison. Alison belongs to an upper class. Right? So, class conflict of characters. Jimmy's responses, right? Alison's responses, character's response. Conflict of ideologies within a text. And we have to always look at author's context. Why Shakespeare portrayed the character Shylock in such a way, right? Author's context, text background, right? Elizabethan's apathy towards Jews, text background, marketing strategies of the text, or reception. So all these things are very, very important. So I'm reminded of the literary festivals. The literary festivals also commodify cultural texts or cultural practices, right? So there's no time to explain that in detail. So in works, you have to think about the reinforcement or critique of ideology a text conveys. Sometimes a text reinforces a particular class ideology, ruling class ideology, or other ideology. Sometimes a text critiques that ideology. So you have to be very, very conscious about that also, right? So before we wind up, so there are so many concepts in Marxism: alienation, antagonism, base, superstructure, capitalism, communism, economic determinism, ideology, hegemony, means of production, materialism, etc., etc. So you have to be very clear about all those things when we study Marxist approach. So let me sum up with an observation. So when we talk about Marxism, in some books we come across the word Marxisms in the plural sense. Okay, so we have to approach Marxist literary theory in the plural sense, Marxist literary theories, because we have so many thinkers coming after Karl Marx and Engels. They revised or they modified the classical Marxism by linking it with the different domains, including ecology and feminism, etc., etc. Right. So Marxism is no more a rigid field. The broad area it has become flexible, and different theoreticians they have come across. So they have come up with the different ideas. There are still more and more developments going on in the field of Marxism. So that's all about Marxist literary theories. So sorry for summing up everything in a quick time. And obviously, I have missed out so many aspects, so many points. I had to do that to condense everything within 1 hour. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you so much for the descriptive session, sir. We have a few questions. Can I ask them now from students? So one student, Varsha A, has asked that she couldn't see the slide Marxist feminism because that was quickly moved. So if you could just show her the slide.
Yeah, definitely.
Marxist feminism.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, this is a slide. Marxist feminism.
Yes, sir. And meanwhile, whether once she notes it, we have another question from Ashwati A. Nair. She wants to know the terms RSA and false consciousness.
Okay. Let me begin with that concept, false consciousness. Marx and Engels, they proposed this concept, false consciousness. It's an ideology when they discussed ideology. And according to Marx and Engels, ideology is nothing but false consciousness. It's an illusion created by the capitalist class or ruling class. When it comes to Althusser later, when he proposed RSA, RSA directly imposes ideology on masses or on civil society. If you ask me the connection between RSA and false consciousness is rather indirect, whereas RSA's operation is direct. If you do something which is what we call antisocial, you will be put behind bars. The action is direct, it is explicit, whereas the false consciousness takes place very often unconsciously.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. We have one more question from Surya Melepa. He's asking you to explain the term culture industry.
Yeah, culture industry is actually, I think I have explained it quickly, actually. A concept introduced, the first point is the concept introduced by Adorno and Horkheimer in their work, Dialectics of Enlightenment. And culture is actually an industry. Culture is produced. It is not. It is not created. That's very important. It is produced and not created. And this, there is a deliberate manipulation. There is a deliberate manipulation in each and every cultural product. A text, a literary text, is a cultural product, and there is an ideology which is which is there, which is encoded. I use the word encoded. There's an ideology which is encoded in a particular text, and it is up to the reader to decode the encoded ideology. So the reader or the audience, they are manipulated by these cultural representations, cultural forms, cultural practices, cultural texts. Let us broadly use the word cultural text. So there is a manipulation of readers by all these products by creating a sense of illusion. Okay, here let me draw an idea by this famous thinker, Guy Debord. So Guy Debord, he wrote a very famous work, Society of the Spectacle. So all these products they create, all these cultural products, they create a make-believe world, a world of illusion. So these cultural products, they are created. Let me take the word created. They are produced by this capitalist class, and these cultural products, they create such an illusion, such a spectacle, which really blind the consumers. That's why we are consumers. We are blinded by this spectacle. We are blinded by the simulated world created by this culture industry and culture products supported by capitalist class. Let me also quote the thinker Baudrillard. Thank you.
I think this will be the last question. That is from Amita. She is asking, can we have a drawback of... one second, sir.
Yeah.
Drawback. Can you please suggest a drawback of Marxist criticism?
Absolutely. Marxism essentially class-centered, but it does not address the issue of caste. Especially I take the case of Indian context. It doesn't address the issue of caste and subalterns. Marxism is class-centered. Marxism does not address subalterns, including Dalits, Adivasis, tribals, etc., etc. Right? We can definitely give a Marxist reading of Untouchable by Mulkarajanan, but there is a problem within that text. The problem is that it's also about caste. So where do we locate caste in Marxism? That's a very, very important gap within Marxist criticism. So it doesn't address caste at all and subalterns. That's why when we take the entire field of historiography in the Indian context, we have a separate group subaltern historians led by Ranajit Guha. On the other hand, we have a Marxist school led by, Sumit Sarkar, Ramana Thapar, but they never come together because they're on separate domains, separate realms. So whereas Deepesh Chakrabarty and other subaltern historians, they target caste and they address other divisions within society, which Marxism does not. And Marxism is essentially class-centered. That's the problem. It continues to be that.
Thank you so much, sir. And just one last one. Shruti has asked if there are any important exam-oriented questions. With that, we would end up.
Exam-oriented questions. If you ask me to give an essay question, I would say, trace the evolution of Marxist literary theory across decades. Right. Okay. Another interesting question is, give a Marxist reading of a particular text. So, explain Marxist literary theory, or explicate theory with the help of a text, a novel, for example. Then there are very important paragraph questions such as, ISA, RSA, alienation is very important. This Lukács's contribution to Marxism is very important. Perhaps Leninist Marxist criticism is a very important paragraph question. Engels's school of Marxist criticism is another important Marxist question. Another important paragraph question based on Marxism. Then Basis of perspective is very, very important as a paragraph question. And Marxism and cultural studies is a very important, paragraph question. And one more essay question. The impact of Marxism on other literary theories. That's very, very important. The impact of Marxism on other approaches of reading literary texts. Marxism and cultural studies. Marxism and psychoanalysis. Marxism and feminism. Marxism and eco-criticism, etc. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir, for your very descriptive session. I thank all the students also who had attended today's session. Hope it was a very useful and explanatory session for you all. I thank you once again, sir, for taking your part in this ASAP webinar online class series.
Thank you so much.